My name is Jerry Davis. I live here in Gallipolis, and I am one of the founding members of the Railroad Freight Station Museum and Yard. I'm on the board of directors and vice president of our railroad group. The Blacktop over here trail belongs to McIntyre Park District. That is where the original rail line was. And then you can see the concrete bases. The semaphore signals were in there. That was the main line. When we get down here lower, I'll show you where the passenger station was, because this was strictly freight. It was built in 1901. And we found out when we went through the process of being listed on the National Park Service's Register of Historic Buildings, this is the only wooden freight station still left on the Hocking Valley Railroad line. And we have tried to restore it historically accurate. We had to put the whole eave back. We gathered up about 1,200 pieces of slate, used 1,100 to patch the holes in the roof, to put the eave back on. And this is a section of roof that went all the way to the end of this loading dock, and we put it back using mortise and tenon, or the wooden peg style. But there were two sections of track. One came in here against the loading dock. One came in over here against the loading dock. And the track that you see, we have put back, because when the station closed 1981, the freight area, the passenger station, the passenger station closed about 45. The freight station here closed 81. The railroad pulled all the track. And so all the track you see has been given to us. We have a track firm that works and has donated their time and effort to put it back down. But this cover went all the way to the end. And then all this area down through here, all the way to the back of the depot, was covered with star brick, which was made up around Nelsonville, Logan, and Athens. And you know, the funniest thing, that brick walked off. It disappeared. And we're in the process of gathering up old brick, and eventually we would like to put the brick back. Of course, we'll never find 4,000 star brick, or more than that, but we will put it back in old brick if we can. With the track in here, this track over here, what we're going to do with it, on the far end that we have laid, we have a 47 boxcar and a 1945 fireless Porter cooker is the name of the switch engine. What we're looking forward to, we have two 1949 Chesapeake and Ohio coaches that have been given to us by Hocking Valley Railroad. We have applied for, and we have been funded through the Transportation Alternative Program grant. We'll be able to bring both those cars down here in the spring. And they are approximately 80 feet long. And we want to bring them down here, put them on track, and restore them as they were back in the 1940 era, 50 era of passenger travel. In the one end of one of the cars, we want to put a coffee shop, sandwich cookie shop, and our local Silver Bridge Coffee Company has told us, you get that coffee shop ready and we'll make a special blend of railroad coffee just for the freight station. In the other car, we want to put individual booths or stalls where the local crafters that don't have a regular place can put their wares in. And we feel like that would be an attraction to the station. It would be an income that would help the station sustain itself and expand. And so we're looking forward to spring and the arrival and work on those two cars. Okay, down here to the right of the last light pole, where that piece of concrete is standing up in the pile of rubble there, that is actually on top of the restroom floor of the old passenger station. That is where the passenger station was. And their little octagonal white tile, and the story is that one of the presidents of the railroad was so very particular about the bathrooms that he redid the floors and he used the little white pieces of tile. And that is still down there under that pile of rubble. Our property goes all the way to Olive Street, and we have our 2 spurs of track. We're hoping to take all the way down there to Olive Street for further expansion. We said we wanted to be a museum with a rail yard. A couple years ago, to help preserve the cars until we can get them professionally done, we got a coat of paint on them. We came in one morning to work, and overnight we were christened an official railroad yard, because overnight we had graffiti added to the cars, making us indeed official. Okay, this is a 1945 Baltimore and Ohio Caboose, and it was made by the Baltimore and Ohio Train Company, and that makes it a little more valuable. It's called a wagon top caboose because of its structure, which you can see. This rail up here, the cabooses had several nicknames, and one of them was Monkey Bar, Monkey Cage, because the conductor, the most important person on the train, lived or stayed back here and did his paperwork. Well, as the caboose went back and forth down the track, you could hold on to this as you walked, because it was called the Monkey Cage, the Monkey Wagon, hence the name Monkey Bars. And some cabooses had 2 sets of bars in them. Okay, you gentlemen are going to have the opportunity to see what millions of Americans have never seen or never will see. A genuine 1945 Baltimore and Ohio bathroom. And of course, back in the 40s and even before, whenever you flushed, it went directly on the track, prior to the government requiring holding tanks. Okay, with this caboose stove, it's kind of interesting. It's got the name of the company, Estate Stove Company, Hamilton, Ohio. But the unusual thing, until we had this stove, I have never seen one with a motto made in the metal. If I am good, please tell others about it. There is a motto that stove has made right into the metal, which I think is interesting, fascinating. Of course, with the stove, it was for heating and cooking purposes, especially cabooses that are on long trips. This would have been a conductor's table where he did his work, and also the crew would have eaten on this table. And as the train traveled from spot to spot, especially if it was gone for several days, the people at the stations would give the train people newspapers, and they would read the local newspapers. When they were through with them, they would save them, and then those newspapers became the tablecloths. They spread them out, ate their meals off the newspapers, wadded them up, threw them away, burned them in the stove, or started their fires with them. And so that was an early way of conserving. Have to pass the test before you can go in this caboose. Well, you see down here, that's somewhat of a modern coupling system. Yeah. You know, they join together, you put your air hoses, connect them together. In the old days, late 1800s, early 1900s, when they coupled the cars, you had to have the railroad guys down there, and they had like a pin. They dropped between...
Lincoln pin.
Yes, they dropped between the cars to hook them. Now, here's where your test comes. I need to see your hands, sir. You failed. Now, I'm going to come over here and look at yours. Failed on that one. What about that? Oh, you have a thumb? Do you have a thumb?
Yep.
Well, you both failed.
Got to cut our thumbs off?
No, yes. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the old railroaders used to say you weren't a true railroader if you had all your fingers and your thumbs, because most of them had lost the end of a finger, a thumb, or even more, trying to put together the old couplings. So that was a test to see if you were a true railroader, and you both failed.
Go ahead and tell us about this car.
Okay, this is a 1969 Southern Railroad Caboose, and we have been told that it is probably in the best shape of any of our cabooses. And with our TRAP grant, when it kicks in the spring, it will repaint the caboose, put its original collars back, replace the broken glass, and the damage to the glass was done before we got the car. It was not done here in Gallipolis, but this was the first car we got from Wheelersburg, Ohio. We were given the car, and you can see on the inside it's probably in the best shape, and we're tickled to death with it. Okay, this is your water tank, and of course it was filled from the outside of the caboose, provided water for your metal sink, and this is somewhat of an oddity in our day and age, a metal mirror. I always tell the school kids, look at this metal mirror. Many of them have never seen one. About 2 years ago, we had a group of ladies in here, and they were from some kind of school. I don't know what they had been into or what had happened, but anyhow, I pointed the metal mirror out and said the school kids had never seen one. And this one lady said, "That's great." And I said, "What's so great about never having seen a metal mirror?" She said, "Simple. If they haven't seen a metal mirror, they've never been in jail." And of course, in here, this would have been the restroom area, which is gone from this coach. Okay, this area here was for storage. You had your seats for your brakeman or flagman to watch what was going on the track, what the cars were doing. And of course, you had your genuine hand operating windshield wipers. You never had a loss of power. They were hand operated windshield wipers. Your 2 rails or monkey bars, storage, the conductor's desk, and then in later years, when the train was running, it would have charged batteries, and the batteries then provided light for you when the train wasn't running. A wooden coal box. Now, this is the jewel. I want you to see a railroad caboose stove. When you talk about the railroad caboose stove, I read a book from a gentleman who was on the railroad for over 50 years, was almost 100 when he died. One chapter was on caboose cooking. Look at the top of that stove and notice the rim. Your coffee pot didn't slide off, your bean pot didn't slide off. He said of the morning when they got up, there would have been a brush back there. You brushed the top of your stove off, you fried your bacon directly on the stove top, then you fried your eggs in the bacon grease. You wanted steak, dust it off, put salt on it, put your steak directly on the stove top, put a heavy piece of metal on the steak so the edges didn't curl up. Baked potatoes, roasted sweet corn, wrap them in foil, put them in the bottom of the ash pit. And there was a whole art of caboose cooking. He said the favorite dessert for caboosemen was pie. You can't make pie on a stove like that. But you can make rice pudding. You can make turtle soup. And for you gentlemen, I will give you the authentic caboose recipe for rice custard and turtle chowder so you can try it.
I got skills in that stove too.
Okay, one other amazing fact too. On long hauls, when the caboose would be gone on a train for 3 and 4 days, the old gentleman said, "You know, the odd thing, the caboose, the whole train stopped in the middle of the night, pitch black. And then it'd start up again." And he said, "You know, the next day we had the best fresh vegetables, corn and tomatoes and beans. They knew which gardens were good." And also another interesting story, When the trains traveled down south in the southern region, there were men who worked for the train crews. They didn't work for the railroad companies, but for the crews. And those gentlemen were hired by the men pooling their money. They kept the wood and coal box full. They kept the lantern globes clean. They kept the lanterns filled with kerosene or lamp oil, but they also did the cooking. And he said in his book that when the train left, a lot of the cabooses had a general storage area called a possum belly. But he said there are also ledges under the caboose where you could get 2 or 3 chicken coops to fit. And he said when that train left, there were a couple of chicken coops, 6 or 7 chickens. 7 or 8 days later when the train got back, the coops were there, but the chickens were missing. Those guys that worked for the crew killed, cleaned, dressed, prepared the chicken for the railroad crew. And one other interesting fact, took us a while to find out. I had been asked repeatedly, did you choose this collar? Why did you choose this collar? This was the collar of the inside of the caboose when we got the caboose. Finally found a clip a year or 2 ago that said many of the caboose companies, when they made the cabooses early on, asked psychologists, what collar do we paint the inside of the cabooses? We want a collar so when the men are inside the caboose, they won't be hyper. It'll be a relaxing, soothing, calming type collar. And then there on the wall, some picture of some gentlemen in a real caboose eating their meal. And the sheet that you have also has a listing of nicknames for the caboose. And Crummy was a common one. One of the ones on there, Glory Wagon. Many of the early trainmen that lost their lives were in train accidents before modern radio communication, were sometimes in the caboose. Glory Wagon or Stairway to Heaven, where the back end of their train had been rear-ended and they were in the caboose and lost their lives in the process. But there's a whole list of nicknames for cabooses on there. And of course, Gorilla Cage, because this is where the conductor was, who had the final say, and he did all of his bookwork here. Okay, well, this is by the Westinghouse, the air brake company. That gives you an idea of the pressure of your air brakes. And then if you needed to apply them or set them, handy handle.
What's the chart behind you? On the wall right behind you.
Oh, right here. This is the transportation, emergency identification, and hazard guide for hazardous materials. If the train was carrying or transporting some kind of hazardous materials, there was a derailment, something jumped the track, a problem, then this is a chart for what the chemical was, and this, that, and the other. And they would know, I guess, how to handle it. Okay, well, in the other caboose, of course, this one's missing the bathroom. But in the other caboose, my grandfather worked up in Meigs County, and he was section foreman on New York Central. And that was back in the early 1900s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And she said that he used to come home on the average of once a month, and said the summer was the worst time. But he would come home and get me a change of clothes, I'm going to the wash house. That the crew that was working on the track, when a passenger train was coming, they could get far enough back from the track, the train wasn't going to hurt them. But maybe they're on a cliff, a hillside, a briar patch or something, and they'd take their chances. She said invariably, once a month, someone would flush the commode in the passenger car. And she said, of course, it went right out on the track. And she said, 2 things mattered. And I said, 2? She said, number 1, what had they done in the commode? And number 2, how fast the train was going. And I said, how fast the train? What did that have to do with it? She said, the faster the train, the worse the spray the men got. So that's why in your old passenger coaches, bathrooms, you've got your signs that say, please flush unless train is standing in station, because it went straight out. Okay, when we got the station in 2016, we started to work on it in summer 2017. It had been years since it had seen a coat of paint. That summer into the fall of 17, we put 40 gallons of primer and final coat on this station. That is Chesapeake and Ohio yellow. Sherwin-Williams mixes it for us. A year or so after that, we had this lady stop. And she was a delightful lady, and I certainly am not making fun of her. Very nice, luxurious car. As we would say in Southeastern Ohio, she was dressed fit to kill. But the thing about her, she had this delightful British accent. Well, sir, can you tell me what we're doing with this station? What are you doing with that? And what's this car for? That British accent was absolutely delightful. She got ready to leave. She thanked us for showing her the cars through the station. She was out front. She started to get in her car, and she's looking up at the station. Oh, yes, sir. And can you tell me the name of this paint and why? And I said, well, that is Chesapeake and Ohio yellow. Sherwin-Williams mixes it for us. And I told her about the chassis system and the kitties and everything. Well, could you tell me the name of it? And I said, well, I don't know offhand. Let me go in the office. I can get a gallon can. It's got the name on the can at the top, the mixing instructions, and maybe I can find a paint chip. And she's looking up at the building and all, and she says, oh, no, sir, that's quite all right. Thank you again so much. As far as I am concerned, it is baby shit yellow. Click, you have a lovely day now. And I tell you, she went all the way to the end of the street, turned left. I was still standing there, totally dumbfounded. Never would I have thought those words would have come out of that woman's mouth. Okay, this coach was built in the late 1940s, and it was built for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it was known as the Lewistown Inn. It had about 20 to 21 berths in it. Then the Pennsylvania Railroad converted it into a passenger car with a smoking lounge. It went to New Jersey Transit. They used it, and then they sold it, and they sold it to Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus. And they converted the inside of it into rooms for their circus people. And some of the trapeze artists lived in this car when it traveled from city to city with the circus. When the circus closed a few years ago, they put it up for sale. A couple in Georgia bought it, brought it to Huntington, West Virginia for Collis P. Huntington to redo. They found another car that they liked better, got it, put this one up for sale. And we got like our second state grant, and we finally were able to buy the car and move it to Gallipolis with our second state grant. And with our TAP grant, one room is going to be a bathroom, one room we're going to put back the way it was for the trapeze artist, third room, warming kitchen, and the rest of the car, movable tables and chairs, heating, cooling, audio visuals. We are constantly asked, do you have a place that we could rent for a birthday party, a baby shower, a reception? That would be a source of income for the station that would help us. So we're looking forward to getting started on this car again in the spring of the year with the TAP money to refurbish it. Okay, you can see by looking at the floor the layout of where the various rooms were. And when the people found another coach they liked better, they told them in Huntington, just literally stop, do no more to the car. And so this is the way we received the car when it came to us. Now, the fascinating part back here, the second room is the best example of the entertainer's room. And I'll show you that if you like. Okay, this is the best example of one of the entertainers' rooms. Okay, this is one of the typical entertainers' rooms. The internet connection or cable connection would have been up here when it pulled into the city where the circus was performing. Each room had refrigerator, freezer, your stovetop, your microwave oven, and your sink. And of course, down here by day, this could have been a couch or table, at night a bed. Then this was a bunk bed. Now, the most amazing thing, if you'll open the door behind you, you will see their genuine bathroom. Notice the commode and the shower is behind the door.
Okay, pardon me.
You can actually sit on the commode and wash your feet at the same time. Now, how's that for wise use of space?
Perfect.
Okay, on the back side of this door, we found a mark, a squiggly line in the wood, 1937 above it, and K in a circle. K was the initial of the agent master, and this was the height of the Ohio River in this station in the 1937 flood. Okay, the building up here with the yellow front used to be a garage, and then it was abandoned. The owner of it let the museum use it for storage. And about 3 years ago, we were able to purchase the building, and through a grant, through the General Assembly, we're in the process of restoring the building and redoing it. We've got a new roof on it, and we're getting ready to cover the outside and redo the inside, and that would be available space to work on things and be available space for expansion for the museum. And this jewel here, we were finally, after trying for 8 years, we were finally able to purchase that house back in February. And there is a government grant program that is available, and it has just been funded by the governor within the past week or so, and that building is on the list to be torn down. It will be torn down, hauled away, the lot leveled and seated at no cost to the Freight Station Museum. So we're tickled to death. And that would give us an additional outdoor space for railroad displays, possibly some track, and maybe even an Airbnb caboose. A gentleman stopped and dropped off a load of sandstone for us. One of our members is part of the brick collecting club. He said, "Do you know what you have down there?" And we said, "No." Well, these two sandstones were in the pile. If you look on them, you can see the cutting marks where the step have been cut out. These were used especially in Europe and the United States as well. You rode your horse into the store, the station, wherever, tied your horse up here, and then if you were getting on, 1 step, 2 steps, over the horse's back. If you were getting off, 1 step, 2 steps, and down. For the ladies and the elderly to get on and off if they rode into a station or a store horseback. Okay, we are in the office of the 1901 freight station by Hocking Valley Railroad. And the office is pretty much the way it was when it was up and running. This table in front of me was the telegraph table. We have a new top on it because it had been damaged by a leak in the roof. We have a sample of a Morse code, and the kids love that. And then later on, after the Morse code, you had your headphone sets, and then you would plug into the switchboard up there, so to speak, to connect with an office in Middleport, Pomeroy, Logan, Columbus, what have you. The original clerk's table is over there. They did their transactions, handed them through the windowed space there by the doors that would have been open out into the freight area. The desk is original, and if you notice, it is a double-sided desk. And again, we had to replace the top on it due to the water damage. But there were 2 clerks there. And then this is a neat piece. It was not in the station here, but a stove similar to this. This is a Burnside number 3. A stove much bigger than this would have been in here. And down here, you can see on the front, Kling and Company, Gallipolis, Ohio. This stove was actually made in Gallipolis, Ohio. And here is a picture of the old Kling Stove Company that's down on the end of 2nd Avenue. And it was started in 1869 by William Kling. This is a picture that was given to us a couple years ago. And this shows the old silver bridge that went down in late '67. This is the railroad bridge beside it that's still in use. But this is the silver bridge that went down rush hour traffic in '67. Now, this is a good example of primary history, first-hand account. A gentleman sent us a note from Tennessee this spring. He collects railroad memorabilia. He said, I have a copy. I have 3 copies of the orders for the coach traveling back and forth between Gallipolis and Point Pleasant from the little office up at Canaga on Route 7 across from the roadside park. But I don't have a picture of the Bud coach. I'll trade you. He sent us these 3 sets of orders from New York Central. They're dated January 16th. And we sent him pictures or copies of this Bud coach. The railroad brought that in here. It was a self-motorized coach, and it carried people across the railroad bridge going to Point Pleasant or Mason County, the people in Mason County coming to Gallia County. And since the freight station was still open, it loaded and unloaded here, and it fueled here. And it provided a means of transportation until the ferry service was started. And so that's a little bit of history. And if you believe the Mothman had anything to do with the Silver Bridge, in case he would come to visit us, we have his picture on the wall because we don't want to offend him. If you go up Route 7 towards Kiger Creek and Cheshire and Gavin, across from the roadside park, you have the remains of what was the Canaga Station block office. Now, my question is, here is this lamp pole outside of the station. You see those 2 structures on it? And on the end, it's like a V. What were those 2 used for?
Mail
what purpose
bags?
did that serve?
Mail?
Mail bags is a good guess, but not quite.
Work orders?
Ah, very good. Very good. Back before they had modern radio communication, if the agent master had a message for the engineer, he would wrap it up, tie it on a thin piece of string or substance between that V, and then the engineer didn't have to stop and restart his train to get the message. He would slow his train down, he'd reach out and grab the message. And that was at engineer height. This was at the conductor's height in the caboose. So they both got the same orders. Now, if the conductor or the engineer wanted to leave the station master a note, he could write it out on paper, wad it up, put a heavy rock or a marble or 2 in it. And as the train went by, he'd toss it out on the platform in front of the station. And it was weighted so the train wouldn't suck the note underneath. Very clever in that era. Very clever. And from this 1949 train magazine, Here's the illustration of an engineer reaching out to get his orders. He slowed his train down. He's reaching out to get them. It took us 4,000 to put the floor back. Half of these are original from 1901. We've had brick collectors from various places in Ohio come to just see the star brick floor. These are some various pictures of the station in different stages. This is after the station was closed, before they pulled the tracks. This is what the building looked like when we got the building in later years. There's the office you just came out of. Over here, this is the freight area, museum portion that you're in now, and you can see the shape that it was in. When we started to work on this, the homeless people were a little upset that they had to vacate, and the pigeons were too. And it's a wonder the building was left standing, because in the center of our layout, in the sand-based floor, there was a huge fire pit that they had used to stay warm to cook on. It's a wonder the building didn't go up in smoke. This is what little of the original wood that was on the station wall in here, or the freight room wall, that we could save to put on display. The rest of this wood is poplar. It was cut here in southeastern Ohio and kiln dried by a gentleman on the other side of Rio Grande. And we were able, with our third state grant, second or third, to foam insulate the building and to put the poplar back on the walls. Okay, on this side, this is one of our jewels. This is a railroad safe. There was a gentleman in here a few years ago, back in 2023. He was almost 90, and a day or two later, his daughter called and said, "My dad says his railroad safe should be in your museum, not in his garage." And so we have it. But this is really the jewel here. This is made by the same company that made that safe, but if you notice, the Hocking Valley Railroad Company. This was in a little station up in central Ohio called Harpster. That station burnt years ago, and one of the gentlemen that was living there, or was working there at the time, got the safe out after the building had burnt, and he had had it for several years. He passed away this past spring, and his wife donated it to the station.
Hello, I'm Jim Love. Come and see us and get a better view of our layout.
Okay, well, down this side, we have a variety of tools on the wall. We have the tie carriers, we have the rail carriers, the spike mauls, and some of those tools we have actually used, and our volunteers have used, to actually lay track outside in the rail yard. And then one of our members brought this neat piece in, and if you notice the initials, Hocking Valley Railroad. It is a wooden water barrel from the old Hocking Valley line. And so this is just a variety of the tools. And if you look at those tools, somewhere on them will be the initial of the railroad for the most part. And the same way over there with the lanterns, the buckets, the tools and everything. We have been told that in the early days, late 1800s, 1900s, that the people who went to work for the railroad, when they signed their contract, there was a clause that the railroad police could go through your building, your house, your barn, etc., just so if you got confused when you're eating your lunch and a lock or a tool or something went in your lunchbox and went home. It was marked Hocking Valley Railroad, New York Central, or whatever. So how did you explain on your work table you've got 2 or 3 Hocking Valley Railroad ranches? Well, this is what one of our gentlemen brought into this. This was an award that an AEP power plant had received. It's entitled Safety 2000 1999 AEP. The tradition continues. Southern Ohio Coal Company, Meg's Mine number 2, and the number of hours they had worked without any accidents. And when the mine closed, the company didn't take the statue, and one of the workers brought the statue home. And again, when we got started, he brought it over here to us to put on display.
They used to, on an evening shift, they would bring a coal train from Minerton Mine to the power plant, and then they stopped that. They put in belt line, and they did not need the railroad anymore.
And most of the tools and everything that you see on the wall have been donated by various people. They've had this or they've had that, and they have brought them in, and we have put them on display. And the same way with the rail cars down here. They have been brought in and donated to us. And when we fire the trains up in a little bit, many of the trains were donated by supporters and people that had parts of train sets, and they brought in for us. And when we were outside, we were talking about the mortise and tenon structure of the eave. This is one of the old support beams. And this is a good example of how you did the support beam. You put this on the building, put it down, and then here's your wooden peg that was driven through to hold that in place. So that's a good example of the mortise and tenon style of building. Okay, this is one of the few things that we found in the building. This was in a booklet, and it was falling apart, the cover. And so one of our ladies took it apart, put it together in this picture album. This is a receipt book for the year 1917. And on any given date, like here's April the 7th, 1917, it tells you the goods that went through this station and the value of those goods. And it has a place on here to list the currency, the silver and change, and the gold. And then down here is the total for the day, and here's the stamp where that would be, or where that was deposited in the account of the Hocking Valley Railroad line. And so that is an excellent source of primary history just for 1 year of the existence of the building.
A fellow worker, Harold Mead's father, made 10 of these. It was for his sons and grandsons. And Harold and I have been friends. We were both operators here. So he decided to give it to me, and I brought it in and set it on top of this desk, which is a roll-top desk. And if you notice the detail of the hand carving, and the gentleman made 10, and if you notice right at this point here, there's a 7 on the head end of the engine. So this is the 7th one he made of 10. And Harold donated that to the museum. he was very much in detail of everything that he did to this engine as he made it. Okay, this is a roll top desk, which was from the C&O Railway. It came from Huntington, donated to us. And it's the only one I know of around here that I can actually say was C&O. The train on top, as you see here, was carved by a worker here, and he wanted to put it in here and share it with us. So the ideal place was right on top of the C&O desk.
One of our members, who's an avid train collector, worked on the layout. The cars behind these three windows belong to him. Those are about, what, Jim, 1940 Lionels, and they're in working condition. And probably, we've been told, there's $8,000 to $10,000 worth of train cars here, because they're so hard to find and they are working. And then those are some old toy train cars. The bottom one, the trolley, was made up around Dayton, Ohio. And now the rest is just a variety of railroad memorabilia. The various lanterns, locks and keys, and switchyard lights. Now, sir, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You see this train up here?
Yeah.
That is a replica of the Central Pacific Railroad of California. If I would have gone to the store when those 4 cars were new and in a box for sale, what was inside of them? What was inside the engine, the tender, and the 2 cars?
Probably replicas of people. Kitchen car, maybe.
No.
A berth car.
No.
Freight car.
No.
Well, I plead ignorance.
Well, you lost the Jeopardy question. Liquor. I think he knew and just didn't want to admit it. You take the smokestack off, the wood pile, and the 2 roofs. There's a pour spout there. Those were bourbon whiskey containers.
Wow.
A whiskey company started to make them, put whiskey in them, and the engine and the tender were so popular, they added the 2 cars to the collection. But those were bourbon containers.
Well, I was a teetotaler.
Oh, okay, okay. We'll excuse you then. Look at the artwork. To me, it is artwork, the design on that lock. And then look at this one over here, the Pacific Railroad, their bridge department, railway and bridge department. But the amount of time that went into the work on those locks is amazing. Leda and Ironton, Henry Ford's Railroad, Chesapeake and Ohio, New York Central, Penn Central. And you see the different types of lanterns. See, there's the color of the globe, the number of wire protectors, the structure of the base. Well, the train set is just a collection. It is a work in progress. It's been in progress since we opened back a few years ago. Different people have donated different buildings, different track, and our two gentlemen that work on it the most, they periodically switch the trains out. So one train may be running for 5 or 6 months and they replace it with another train with different cars. So when people come in, you can, in essence, see a different train or two running. And people have donated the villages and the accessories. We'll show you some things once they're all fired up. See around the edge. When the school kids come in, the littler kids, the lower grades, like to pick out a train and follow it all the way around the square, and they'll run the distance beside the train. And what's really neat, you look on the end of the caboose at the lights on the end. And then in this one, you see the people in the windows? They're waving at you, so you're supposed to wave back. Now if I turn the lights off, they'll show up more. Is that okay?
That's fine. Go right ahead.
Granny had her chair up against the side here, still watching. Oh, our engineer here, his name is Eugene, but we call him Hammer. And he is an excellent woodworker, and he does very well with running the trains too. Now, look underneath the spaceship. You see the cow and the rope. The farmer's in the background trying to keep his cow from going back to outer space.
Did you tell them about the buckets up there?
The fire buckets, do you know what those are for?
Tell us.
Jim, enlighten them on the fire buckets. There's
Well,
two
back
there and one
in
on
the
wall.
days of steam, there was a lot of wooden bridges. And the old wooden barrels that used to set out there, if you had a bucket and you tried to get down in there, you couldn't get much water out. But you can get the same amount of water out faster with one of these, because it will let you go all the way through like that as you're taking the water out of the barrel. But a bucket won't, because the wide bottom you can't. And that was where they had the wooden barrels setting out on the trestles or bridges.
Okay, this is a flyer I'll give you. It is for our 3rd annual Steampunk Festival. It is on Saturday, May 3rd, 2025 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we have different vendors, and the vendors have to have goods and things from the steampunk era, the 1880s, the Victorian England period. One group sponsors a contest for people dressed in that period of time. We have some of the steam machines here as a demonstration. Our antique car club participates. And last year and again this year, we have a live band that is performing. And entrance into the museum and everything's totally free. So come down and join us.